Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 5 of NMP 600 Foundations of Nonprofit Management. Well, week 5, it's hard to believe we're in the second half of our course. It's all going by so quickly, and I hope that you are feeling a little bit less overwhelmed now that you're past the midterm. I want to thank you for your comments last week about how you're doing and how this course is meeting your expectations or suggestions. There's lots of learning packed into these 8 weeks, and in particular the first 4 weeks of NMP 600 contain a lot of groundwork material. And I know that it also has afforded a lot of you an opportunity to really work on your time management skills as well. So I congratulate you all in getting to week 5. And we're going to, as you'll see at the end of this recording, when we talk about our assignments for the week, you'll see that we're going to take just a little bit of a breather, and the assignments for the week will be a little lighter to acknowledge, number one, that you've done a great job with a lot of material in the first 4 weeks of the course. And also, this is Thanksgiving week, and we want you to have some opportunity for that work-life balance, and we want you to be able to spend some time with your families for Thanksgiving. So that said, this week we're going to be reading about, and in the discussion forums talking about, governance of nonprofit organizations. According to Peter Drucker, one of your readings for the week, it is to the benefit of a nonprofit organization to have a strong board, and it takes an enormous amount of effort on the part of the nonprofit executive director to make this happen. Drucker goes on to suggest that board management is a crucial central part of the nonprofit CEO's role. And yet, board dissatisfaction runs rampant in nonprofits of all types and all sizes. If you took an informal anonymous poll and asked nonprofit CEOs what's wrong with boards today, you would probably hear that board members don't know or understand their roles, or that they're either not committed enough or that they're too involved and that they micromanage. You might also hear that it is getting increasingly difficult to recruit the types of people that could make a difference to their boards. So this week's readings will elaborate on the work of the board of directors in a nonprofit organization and highlight the opportunities for managing these relationships to enhance the organization's performance. So here are the key questions to think about. What is the ideal role of the board of directors in a nonprofit organization? How can the board of directors be used to spur the nonprofit to excellence? What does an effective board look like, and why is it so difficult to achieve a highly performing board? How can the board and executive director work together most productively? What are common barriers to board effectiveness? How might nonprofits deal with troublesome board members? And finally, what can the staff do to support board effectiveness and work? You're going to notice in this week's module that there is a very long list of supplemental materials. Now, I want to stress that I certainly do not expect you to read all of these supplementary materials. One suggestion that I do have for this and your future courses in the program is to somewhere on your computer's hard drive, create a folder, and then within that some subfolders so you can organize the materials, but to save these articles as a body of resources that you can draw upon, not only as you move through these courses here in the NMP program, but on into your professional lives and careers. You will find often that you'll refer back to some of these resource materials, even though you might not have read them thoroughly in the class structure. They're still there for you as resources as you move beyond the classroom. So let's take a little bit of time and talk about governance. As in the for-profit world, boards of directors are responsible for the moral and legal leadership of the organization, strategy determination, allocation of resources, goal setting, evaluation of performance, rewarding and motivating management, making the tough decisions on top personnel, and being willing and available to assist in the area of special expertise. In fact, the trustee's role may mean far more to the success of the institution in the voluntary world because of the board members' financial contribution and community outreach. In an essay by Stephen Block, he puts forth that the board of a nonprofit organization really has three specific areas of duty. The first is the duty of loyalty, which is to act in the best interests of the organization, to avoid self-interest. And one of the ways to do this is to have the board affirm a conflict of interest policy and adhere to that policy, to practice full disclosure of potential conflicts of interests, and when so necessary to abstain from discussion and voting on any decisions which might be impacted by that conflict of interest. The duty of care. To uphold their duties with reasonable and prudent care, which includes attending meetings, understanding the issues before casting a vote, and not to simply act as a rubber stamp. And third, the duty of obedience, to act according to the law and in accordance to the organization's mission. I would refer you back to the case study that we took a look at in week 3. And in that case study, if you'll remember, Mary had to make a decision about whether to vote to accept the funding or to not accept the funding. And there you see an example of the duty of obedience. So we're going to take some time and take a look at the principles for good governance and ethical practices. This is material which has been supplied by the independent sector. And you see there at the bottom of the slide the URL where you would find in more detail this guide. The legal compliance and public disclosure piece of this is important. A charitable organization must comply with all applicable federal laws and regulations, as well as the applicable laws and regulations of the states and the local jurisdictions in which the organization is based or operates. Now, next week we're going to be studying specifically the legal issues, but for now, be aware that it is a key factor of good governance. If the organization conducts programs outside of the United States, it must also abide by the applicable international laws and regulations that are legally binding on the United States. A charitable organization should have a formally adopted written code of ethics, as we talked about in last week's discussion forums, with which all of its directors or trustees, staff, and volunteers are familiar and to which they adhere. And finally, a charitable organization should adopt and implement policies and procedures to ensure that all conflicts of interest or the appearance of a conflict of interest within the organization and the board are appropriately managed through disclosure, recusal, or other means. Let's talk a little bit about what effective governance means. A charitable organization must have a governing body that is responsible for reviewing and approving the organization's mission and strategic direction, its annual budget, and key financial transactions, compensation practices, policies, and fiscal and governance policies. The board of a charitable organization should meet regularly enough to conduct its business and fulfill its duties. The board of a charitable organization should establish its own size and structure and review these periodically. The board should have enough members to allow for full deliberation and diversity of thinking on governance and other organizational matters. Except for very small organizations, this generally means that the board should have at least 5 members. And the board will be governed by the written bylaws of the organization. And in reviewing prospective board candidates, 2 issues that should be on the table for discussion are what skills does the current board need, and to look for individuals who not only have a connection to the organization but who may have these needed skills. And finally, diversity. So that the board, in an ideal world, is a reflection of the constituency that the organization serves. And in some cases, this means that there are clear expectations of what each board member's roles and responsibilities are. And in some cases, it may mean a specific job description. So that there is agreement ahead of time about what the expectations and the commitment are. So the board's role in stewardship is very clear in terms of the duty of care and the duty of loyalty that we've just been discussing, and the expectation that they will promote and protect the mission of the organization. You see here some other key factors: managing board recruitment, to set a strategic direction for the organization, to personally participate in the fundraising process. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. To maintain a business mindset, to ensure accountability, to monitor the competitive environment, meaning the exterior environment in which the organization exists, and finally, to remain open to new opportunities. So what does setting the strategic direction consist of? Well, first, to establish a vision for what the organization might look like in an ideal world, to affirm the mission of the organization, and to clarify the organizational values. In some cases, this may mean a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, in order to ascertain where the organization currently stands and what are its opportunities and what are its strengths and weaknesses, and to establish some goals, moving forward, and objectives and an action plan, and how are we going to measure the success or the outcomes of our actions in achieving our goals. As we mentioned before, the board needs to be actively engaged in fundraising. And as you can see, this means a number of things, including making a personal gift. It also means that solicitation materials and other communications addressed to donors and the public must clearly identify the organization and be accurate and truthful. The board is responsible to make sure that the contributions are used for the purposes consistent with the donor's intent, whether as described in the solicitation materials or as specifically directed by the donor. A charitable organization must provide donors with specific acknowledgments of charitable contributions in accordance with IRS requirements, as well as information to facilitate the donor's compliance with tax law requirements. The organization should adopt clear policies based on its specific exempt purpose to determine whether accepting a particular gift would comprise its ethics, its financial circumstances, its program focus, or other interests. The organization should provide appropriate training and supervision of the people soliciting funds on its behalf to ensure that they understand their responsibilities and applicable federal, state, and local laws, and that they do not employ techniques that are coercive, intimidating, or intended to harass potential donors. A charitable organization should not compensate internal or external fundraisers based on a commission or a percentage of the amount raised. And finally, a charitable organization should respect the privacy of individual donors and, except where disclosure is required by law, should not sell or otherwise make available the names and contact information of its donors without providing them an opportunity at least once a year to opt out of the use of their names. Another important responsibility of the Board of Directors is to annually review the performance of the CEO, to not only recognize his or her accomplishments, but to set meaningful goals for the future, and to conduct an annual board self-assessment. To review each member's individual contribution, to identify opportunities for improvement, and to implement those recommendations. Now, some boards do not do this annually, but it's recommended that it be done at least once every 3 years. So despite strong feelings to the contrary, nonprofits need both an effective board and an effective executive. Drucker says neither the board-dominated nor the executive-dominated nonprofit is likely to work well, let alone succeed in perpetuating itself beyond the tenure of an autocrat." End quote. Drucker has likened the working relationship between the board and the executive to a double bridge team, in which neither player is more important. They are equals, and they are equally indispensable. The fabled division of labor between boards and executive directors is actually quite porous and very fluid in effectively led organizations. While the wrangling over boundaries can cause tension and conflict, the idea that the board makes policy and the executive carries it out is a vast oversimplification. In fact, there is a large overlap in responsibilities. O'Connell says the board, with the help of the staff, makes policy, and the board, with the help of the staff, carries it out. Now, this issue is renegotiated every 2 to 3 years as board chairs turn over or when a new executive is hired. And how well the parties are able to come to terms with this dilemma determines really the longevity and the morale of both board and staff within the organization. And here in this slide you see some very specific delineations of the responsibilities of the board and the staff, and you can see very clearly where the areas of overlap are. And another key responsibility of the board is to prepare for the future of the organization, and this includes succession planning. Developing leadership not only within the board but also within the staff to determine and define how to bring up young leaders within the organization so that they are prepared for that succession moment, to prepare for an unexpected or emergency vacancy, and finally the planned departure of key players, either the CEO or the president of the board, for example, so that there is not a vacuum when a key person departs. And in order, the key to success for all of these things is clear lines of communication and sharing of information. More recently, the board's role has been expanded to include the larger challenge of improving performance and accountability. The nonprofit board operates at the intersection of public trust and organizational performance, according to Letts. Nonprofits need both strong organs of accountability for mission, for results, for allocation of resources and productivity, but also a clear process for discharging these responsibilities. And according to Drucker, they need effective, strong, directed governance and a clear governance structure. Put another way, the board's contribution is meant to be strategic, the joint product of talented people brought together to apply their knowledge and experience to the major challenges facing the institution. Engaged at this level, boards concern themselves with critical issues which are central to the institution's success. They focus on specific results linked to defined timetables, and they have clear measures of success and engage with the organization's internal and external constituencies. Unfortunately, nonprofit boards are very often little more than a collection of high-powered people engaged in low-level activities, according to Taylor, Chait, and Holland. So reflect on the boards with which you have experience and think deeply about where they fall in this spectrum of good governance principles. In order to raise the standard of board engagement, the board itself must achieve the difficult task of operating at a higher level of performance themselves. Indeed, if boards are going to hold the organization to be more productive, they ought to hold themselves to the same standard, should they not? But what is high performance governance? How does one define it? How does one measure it? How does one hold volunteer board members accountable for it? Balance it against their other commitments, such as fundraising. To do so requires nonprofits to reframe the board's mission based on a new understanding of how organizational performance contributes to impact, according to Letts. Specifically, boards can, first and foremost, help build a culture that values organizational performance rather than seeing it as antithetical to compassion and public service. So let's take a look ahead to this particular week 5. As I said, it's Thanksgiving week, and I want to give you all an opportunity to take a little bit of a breather so that the assignments for this week are just a little bit lighter than they have been in the first 4 weeks. The discussion forums, I've extended the final deadline to Saturday at midnight for this week. Still try to get your initial postings done by Tuesday night so that there is some sense of real discussion going on in the forums. But the deadline for the final postings will this week only be Saturday night at midnight. Your key assignment is to review the materials on the key requirements which you will find at the end of the NMP SFP program. Specifically, those are the e-portfolio and the narrative essay and the capstone project. You will see links in the week 5 module which will take you to PowerPoint presentations, and I want you to really think carefully, really take a look at those PowerPoints and think carefully about how you can begin even now to prepare for those key assignments at the end. Specifically, the e-portfolio. Take a look at what it is and how you're going to be putting it together, and realize that a key component of that e-portfolio will be reflections on your takeaways, your learnings from each of the classes that you will have taken in your program. And a very important part of that is begin now in this very first course for many of you to set up a series of folders where you can store important assignments or important reflections, so that when you, on this particular course, so that when you get to the end of your program, it will be very easy for you to review what the key takeaways were from each of the courses that you've taken. And finally, your last assignment is to take a breather during this week 5. Take some time to enjoy the Thanksgiving holiday and to enjoy your families. You've done a tremendous job in the first 4 weeks, and I appreciate all of the time and energy that you all have put into this class so far. And I look forward to the last 4 weeks, but in particular, at the end of this week, take some time just to relax and enjoy your family and enjoy your Thanksgiving holiday. And I will see you online in the discussion forums. Thanks so much.